if you can cram a bunch of activity into your time, then you must be successful. You must be in demand. When actually the core of that is that we don't want to be by ourselves with ourselves, because it's sometimes haunting. And the truth of how we feel about ourselves is you got to face down some dragons if you really want to be free.
Welcome to What I Meant to Say. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, founder of Be Better Media and a mom of 4, passionate about human connection. Throughout my journey, I have experienced many What I Meant to Say moments. But since life doesn't give us do-overs, I've created a space to reflect and tell our stories again, with a little more grace for ourselves and the hope that we can help others and be better for having listened. Welcome to What I Meant to Say. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, and I'm here today with Dr. Michael Gervais. There is nothing I'd rather do on a Friday afternoon than have this amazing performance psychologist, host of my favorite podcast, Finding Mastery, and the author of this brand new book, The First Rule of Mastery, Stop Worrying What Other People Think of You. And I've read it. I'm very grateful to have had the copy and a couple of weeks to read it, and it's awesome. So congrats.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
I love being here with you.
Oh,
and so
you.
like this is you have a sense of learned wisdom where like you walk the walk and you talk the walk, and there's no BS about it with you. So it's appreciated and noted, and I feel it as well.
Well, I cannot tell you how much of that has been garnered through your podcast.
Oh, that's fun.
So really, I just had somebody on the other day that was talking about the difference between therapy, coaching, and mentorship.
Yeah.
And he broke it down in a really cool way. But the branch of mentorship is so powerful. And in the last 5 to 10 years, I was really in a space where I didn't feel like I had that. The people you have brought on that podcast, the little things that they say and do, and like you say, walk the walk, you just start adding the little things up, and they're game changers.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's good. Do you have a mentor? No. Are you in a fortunate position to mentor others?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but you haven't had that.
When you say that, like it's almost a pain point, because I just go, I don't know.
It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. I mean, like you were saying, I talk to coaches all the time, and I do love to coach, and untapped human potential has become a thing where I go, I'm just ravenously interested in how do we help people become better versions of themselves, which is why I love what you do. But yeah, it's the mentorship piece. I feel like I pull from different places, and I'm a ravenous reader and podcast listener, but
yeah, it is amazing that there's something really special about when there's a live person that is giving their time and attention to try to help you. And maybe they're professionals, but they're not acting in a professional capacity. Yeah. They're just, it's like this earnest interest in you. There's something very special. And there also is something to be said about your scrappiness to figure it out by pulling insights and like cobbling it together, which is awesome. And I mean, maybe it just hasn't happened yet. And if you're open for it, I think that that's kind of the first step. I didn't realize, my first mentor, I was 15 when I had Gary de Blasio, but I didn't realize how much I needed one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel fortunate that it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah, it's just powerful. So that's what your podcast has been to me.
Yeah,
and
cool.
I love, all the conversations you've gotten to have. And I'm really excited to dig into
the first rule of mastery.
The first rule of mastery, and like the concept is there, and I love the way that it's such a non-clinical approach to psychology, because it really is bringing it into everybody's everyday lives in a way that they can understand it.
That's such a high compliment to me, because one of the like the pain points is when you read something that's so technical or clinical that it's lost its soul and interest from like a applied standpoint. It's just, so I wanted to write this. I wanted to make sure I was grounded in science, of course, but I wanted to write it in a way that if somebody I knew read it, they'd be like, oh, I feel like you were talking with me. Like, I feel like we were in a conversation. However, I point out when we're not science-backed in it, but for the most part.
But like weaving that, and that's what I love about storytelling, is like to weave the human experience through the lens of psychology.
Yeah.
It's just so relatable.
I think it's one of the most powerful sciences for the next generation. And so the disciplines of science are, there's no pecking order in them, of course, but as we are trying to figure out artificial intelligence and the interface with emotions and human intelligence, it's like that trifecta between this radical outsourced form of intelligence, the machine. We don't know how emotions are going to go for machines yet, but we're not doing great with emotions as humans. And it's the interface between artificial human intelligence and emotional intelligence. Maybe by machines, but certainly by us. So I just feel like psychology needs to be out front. And the next form of leadership is going to be rooted in applied psychology. And those that are on it and have been on it for a long time are showing us how to do it. And those that are kind of poo-pooing psychology or just saying toughen up, harden up, like it's the way it dodo. Yeah.
That concept of being able to sit with your feelings is so huge. And the way the world is today, it's so busy that often people don't do it.
We point out some of the research in here that people would rather shock themselves.
Oh, that's right. That was a killer study.
It wouldn't be uncommon for you or your friends to say, if I just had a little more time, and then we start to muse and fantasize what we would do. We would, put our feet up, we would just have a little bit more time to ourselves. Well, there was an experiment that was run that gave people open time, and they would rather shock themselves than sit with their thoughts. They'd rather shock themselves than meditate. They'd rather shock themselves than muse with their imagination. And so we really don't want to be with ourselves. So when given time, we find ways to fill it. And when people say, how you doing? You busy? It's this reflexive thought that if you can cram a bunch of activity into your time, then you must be successful. You must be in demand. When actually the core of that is that we don't want to be by ourselves with ourselves, because it's sometimes haunting, and it's sometimes the truth of how we feel about ourselves is, I don't know, like you got to face down some dragons if you really want to be free, emotionally, and certainly from a human standpoint. So.
And do you think one of the things that gets in the way is, the fear of what other people think of you?
Yeah, so what happened was I wrote an article. I had this thing that was happening for me, which I noticed that I was playing a second game. And it happened, I first noticed it when I was 16 years old. And I saved up a couple summers, bought myself a Mazda B2000 pickup truck. That's all I could afford.
Yeah.
And I was driving down the street and there was a car passing me in the same direction. So they're going just a little bit faster than me. And I remember I thought to myself, oh, sit up, look cool, because you want to look cool. And so I didn't realize, how incredibly unproductive that was going to be for the next handful of years for me. And the first 16 years, I'm sure I was mired by it. But I put my hand on the steering wheel and I had a cool kid lean, and I glanced over at the car that was barely passing me, and they weren't paying any attention to me. They had no interest in what was happening inside my car. And I had a lightning bolt moment, what am I doing? Why am I trying to fake or look or prop up to somebody that had no interest, zero interest? What was I doing in my regular relationships, let alone this relationship with someone that I was conforming or contorting or being something that I thought that they would approve of? And I was embarrassed by it. I thought that's kind of crazy that I'm acting this way.
That's some high-level insight for a 16-year-old
kid, yeah.
It's just, you're done.
No, you've got kids,
Yeah, and it's making me think of my 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And they're hyper aware of their surroundings, in my opinion.
And so I kept it to myself, and I was I knew it was not the way to go and the way to be, but I also knew that I had this other need to want to be accepted, to look favorable in the eyes of others. But I didn't want to talk about that, because that's certainly for the weak one. That's certainly for the one that is kind of a phony or something. And then I started hearing it in conversations with elite athletes when I was spending time with them. And they wouldn't say it exactly like I just said it. They'd say, when I say what's your relationship with fear? And they go, Oh yeah, it's there. I say, well, what are you afraid of? And I'm shorthanding,
Yeah.
thousands of conversations. They say something like, failure, not living up to my potential. And then double click on that and say, well, what does that mean? Make sure we're not talking about fear of injury. It's something else.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, it's not. It's really not injury. I say, well, what is it? And they say, well, it's like letting people down. It's really like looking stupid and like kind of blowing it when I have my moment, or if I have my moment. That's fear of another person's opinion of who you are. And so I wrote an article on HBR, Harvard Business Press, and they called 24 months after I released it, and they said, who are you? And I said, thank you. And they said, look, this does not happen for 24 months in a row. Your article on how to stop worrying about what people think you, that was the title of it. It was the #1 downloaded article for 24 months in a row. And so they said, let's write a book. And so I said, I got to go to work and put some science behind, those original ideas. And then so it took another 2 years. And so here we are.
That's amazing. It shows you how pervasive the problem is out there.
I think it just touched the nerve. That's what happened.
And what it's bringing up for me is like, can you touch on the difference between acceptance and belonging?
So, all right. Do you want to take a biology stem first? Okay, so we've got this brain, this 3.2 pounds of tissue that's sitting in our skull. It's the most magical machine that we've ever seen. We don't really even know how our brain works. We've got chemistry, we've got neuroelectricity, we've got soft tissue. We don't really know how this thing works. And it's pretty radical. But it's millions of years old in its first programming. And it's trying to operate in 2023 with modern dilemmas and modern challenges. It's not optimized for that. It's optimized for survival. It's optimized without even having to think, to ready oneself to attack a grizzly bear or run away. Run towards the saber tooth if that was what was required, or run away. Wildebeest, grizzly, whatever it might be. We don't even have to think about it. So what ended up taking place is that it's very clear that we're optimized for survival. Our brain is designed to scan the world and find all the things that could be dangerous. But one of the unspoken things that are very, very dangerous to the brain is what a couple 100,000 years ago would have been a death sentence. Which was, if you and I were doing something with the tribe, so we're tribe members, and we go out and we kind of blow it, or we do something unbecoming, or fill in the narrative, it's not okay in the eyes of the tribe, and we're kicked out. That was a near death sentence because it's too much for 2 people, maybe a couple kids and a couple cousins, and call it 10 people, to hunt, to gather, to forage, to protect against wildebeest, saber-tooths, or warring tribes. It's too much. So it's a near-death sentence if you get kicked out of the tribe. So our brains have become highly tuned to the slightest of potential rejection. So it's not so much that we want to belong. It is that, but we're tuned to the slightest potential of rejection. Because when rejection is about to happen, that's a near-death sentence. So we say we want to be accepted, and belonging is like part of a human need. You got to squint at that a little bit, because what's actually happening is we're afraid to be rejected. That's the dictum. Don't get kicked out. Don't blow it. Don't look stupid. Don't be humiliated. Don't be the one that's called out. And that's certainly much more pervasive in much of Western culture. But that's the essence of it. So yes, we want to be accepted because the opposite is the thing that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And when we are accepted, it feels good.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. But we're terrified of being rejected. So what we end up doing is we conform to the norms. We shape shift to belong because belonging is safety.
Yeah.
So fitting in the middle of a pack is safe. As soon as you raise up and speak the truth, you might get your head lopped off. You might get kicked out quickly. You might be ostracized and singled out. And then maybe it's not that immediate circle of people around you that kicks you out, but they're just waiting for the pack leader to come in and be like, oh yeah, that's not cool. you're out of here. And in modern times, it's not that demonstrative. It's much more subtle. You just don't get included. You don't get invited. The party's happening over there. And, FOMO is a fun idea, fear of missing out.
Yeah, right.
And really what's right underneath of FOMO is the fear of how they're going to think if you're not included or if you blow it when you are included. And that's what FOPO is. Not to get too confusing.
No,
right?
no, this is, yeah.
Yeah, but FOPO, fear of people's opinions, it's one of the mechanisms that's right at the core of survival.
Yeah, no, that is something it hits so close to home because, in any journey, like in a family, in an entrepreneurial venture, like trying to articulate who you are and what you're about it can be so hard, and you can be looking in the eyes of somebody and you're like, are they getting me? Are they not getting me?
Yeah,
do they
that's right.
understand what
That's
I'm
right.
trying to say? Did I say it right? Is it really what I'm about? All of these, I mean, I've been there so many times, and
I'm not free from this thing.
yeah.
Like, I am more free than I've ever been.
Yeah.
Because I was heightened to it when I was 16. So it's something that I've been wrestling with, with some awareness for a long time. I do not want to prop myself up in any way to say, oh yes, I'm the enlightened free one from, no, it's too slippery. But I will say that when you have clarity of the values that matter to you, and you've articulated those values in a way that is organically right for you. So you could, for example, say, look, one of the big values for me is freedom of people to express their ideas or whatever. Okay, good. Then the way that you articulate that is your unique principle. So it could be by any means necessary, or it could be, through a benevolence pacifism. Dr. King Jr. and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a tonal difference. The values are the same. There's not like an exponential list of values. There's no, okay. But the way that you put the 2, 3, 4 values that matter to you together are your first principles. And when you go into an environment, instead of pinging off of the eyeballs about somebody else, if you're pinging back to like, am I being honest in my expression of those first principles? And sometimes you'll say like, is this person getting it? But it's not like, are they approving of me? Am I okay in their eyes? You can use that feedback to say, to help articulate, oh, maybe there's a different way I can shape this idea, but I'm not abandoning my first principles. There's a social intelligence to figure out the right way to deliver at the right time. Mm-hmm. But you're not checking in with others to see if you're okay. You're not outsourcing your sense of self-esteem or worth or confidence or value. It's all very different things, but they sound the same. You're not outsourcing that to another person. That's very dangerous. That is a very dangerous thing to do. And it's very common because I was not taught this in grade school or high school. My parents would say things that would kind of help me out. So that's why these 200 pages are like, if you want to find freedom from it, like here is,
it's a journey. There's so much journey to self-awareness in these stories that are like, and hearing from other people, that have been to these high places and realizing that the story is so much the same, that the human experience is still there. And the story that I loved, and I kind of, where it made me think, we have people in our life who we do care what they think.
100%.
And then we're supposed to. But stop worrying about what people at large think of you. It's completely different. But there's a story that you told about yourself when you're working with the MMA, and you got a call and
from a different mentor.
Okay. Yeah. So a different mentor, and he said, you felt called out. Basically.
I totally got called out.
Yeah.
So let's start it this way. There's a difference between worrying and caring. So the subtitle is not stop caring about what people think.
I love that you just hit on that because I kept zeroing in on the subtitle.
Yeah.
And those two words were going interchangeably through my head, and I kept coming back and looking at the title because there was a distinction in my mind. Yeah. So it's really interesting to hear you.
Yeah, this is not about not caring. The not caring is for sociopaths and psychopaths and narcissists and the enlightened, I guess. But like, this is about not worrying. It's not all the excessive worry that goes into, am I going to be okay in the eyes of others? That's what the worry is about. The caring, like if you didn't care what somebody else's thoughts were or opinions were, there's a coldness to that. And this book is about warmth. This book is about being at home with yourself. And one of the things that unearths us from being at home with ourselves, wherever we are, is this excessive worry. Am I okay in the eyes of others? So I was working with a coach who, this was one of the first gyms in California for MMA, Rico Ciparelli, and he's a true master. And so he was way ahead of the curve on investing in the entirety of a fighter. And of course, psychology matters, right? And he wanted to take it further than he could. So he brought me into his camp to work with his fighters. And we're on this one camp, and it was about a 3-month camp. Fight was a championship fight. It was an even fight. It was definitely an even fight. It was awesome, stimulating in every way you could imagine, just like you would hope. We get there the night before, 2 nights before. The night before the fight, we do a full walkthrough, like a wet rehearsal. We walk through in real time. We do the whole thing, how he's going to do his pre-performance routine. So we had everything dialed in, except we didn't practice where the 3 coaches, there was the head coach, myself, and the striking coach, where we were going to go. Because the fighter's supposed to walk up the 5 steps to get in the octagon. Then we were going to walk behind him and then walk on the outside of the cage or the octagon, and there were some seats waiting for us there. So we didn't know kind of where the rest of the whole production crew was. Okay. So we did our hugs, we said our words. He's given us the eye contact. He's fully ready. He walks into the cage, and then we did what we're supposed to do. Now, it just so happened that the production crew, the filming crew, they were capturing where we're going, whatever. And so, fight's over. Athlete does his thing. It was amazing. And I called my mentor on the way home. And the fight was in Vegas. I was driving back to Los Angeles. And this mentor, not my childhood mentor, this was a sports psychology mentor of mine. He says, basically it was, what are you doing on TV? He goes, yeah, I saw what you're doing. He says, what are you doing in front of the camera? I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. I was like, oh shit. Yeah. Like, Dad, do something like, what did I do? And it's not like I'm looking for a camera to try to find an angle. People do that. That was not you. That is not what I was doing. Yeah. And so I got like blasted with this shame, and underneath the surface, I wanted to celebrate. I've always wanted to celebrate the psychology of excellence, the psychology of like what goes into people working to become their very best. I've always wanted to celebrate that. Not me, but that. Yeah. And so I had that thing underneath the surface, and I had a message from the industry that, no, we play in the background. Okay, that is kind of how that's happened. And then I have him coming on top saying that, it did something to me. Yeah. And I metabolized it. It got in, I swallowed it, and it's still a mission of mine to shine the light on this beautiful science. But for about 10 years, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. We play in the background, which is perfectly fair, but it's like the message I got from when I was a kid. Children should be seen and not heard. Yeah. And so this message was like a little bit even more intense. Sports psychologists should not be seen and not be heard. And so I was like, okay, well, let me just be a good, participant in this field. Little did I know, like, the world was asking for it. Mm-hmm. And like I was pulling back, and the world was asking for it, at least in the action sport world where I was, and these combative sports, and then psychology is obviously having its moment now, for all the right reasons. And so that was just a little bit of a scar tissue moment for me. I'm happy I went through it.
Yeah. Well, it's really powerful because it shows, one, how it can make us play smaller than we should. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. And two, that the concept that and you wrote about this, the psychology being celebrated for what it brings out in people, not for what it pathologizes.
Yeah, 100%. That I love how you just said that. I don't think I said it that well. That was really good. Yeah, that was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because that whole concept,
Make a
like,
note of that.
I'm broken, fix me, rather than like, wait, what else? What's standing in your way? I always, and my other thing I go back and forth on is like, okay, what needs to be processed, and what's to fulfill potential. Like,
Oh, that's really
processing. Okay,
God, that's
I'm
really cool.
tired of okay, I know my backstory, I got it,
Yeah, that's really
but
cool.
you can sit there for too long, right?
Oh, you can overprocess that.
Yeah. And that whole concept of what you do is that it's the other side, it's the potential. Okay, the process is good,
Yeah.
but that story, the other thing I love about that story is that you called your wife, and she has some very choice words. And that concept of we can do a lot to grow on our own, but having the right people in our corner when we have those moments, when somebody has, ignited something in us,
Yeah,
that you
100%.
get that, no, you're good.
Yeah, you're
And even though you say you metabolized it and you take it in and it still affects you,
Yeah.
there's that person or some community or person that can.
Yeah, it was like a counter rotation. Like I rotated pretty hard. I'm like, oh God, what did I just do in the eyes of my mentor? Like, what, And then she helped with the counter rotation, my wife. And so I was sitting somewhere in the middle between the two.
Yeah.
And so I think that my wife taught me, yes, there's science behind this, but my wife taught me how to stop worrying. She taught it to me. And she didn't study it, she learned it. So she was way ahead of the curve before I was. And that's born out of her unique life experiences and her traumas and her deep commitment to want to be more free. And so I'll just note this one more time, is that people used to ask me all the time, what are the common threads of the greats? And I thought, that's what maybe would be an interesting course of study. What are those? And I went down that path for a bit and I found some similarities. Yeah. But what I've come to learn now, this is about 2.5 decades into it, they're partners. The best in the world, and there's nothing writ large. There's there's savages that are lone wolves. Then even though we don't think the lone wolf can actually do something special because they've been kicked out of the tribe, they're just different.
Yeah.
There's
the outliers.
There's no 0%, 100% of anything. So, but for the most part, the ones that I see that play the long game, and now I'm talking about the difference between high performers and people on the path of mastery. People on the path of mastery, they have a relationship with people, sometimes a spouse, that is fundamentally different. Yeah. And that choice that's an important choice in life.
Yeah. And it's another place to grow. People, you grow on your own, but people grow in community. You always talk about that.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
that nobody does it alone, the concept.
That's right. Yeah.
And being able to articulate my worldview, when I came to compete to create, and Nicole Davis said to me, your whole face lights up when you talk about human connection. If you have somebody see something, I took that moment and keep drawing on that, I was like, oh, she's right.
Yeah.
You need people to bounce things off of.
Yeah. Those that don't have it's some sort of bias interest or whatever. They just really are there benevolently in service.
See.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Nicole, Dr. Davis now.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, 2-time Olympian, Dr. Davis.
Absolute rock star.
I've been fortunate she's been just a rock solid partner in our Finding Mastery consulting business, and she's awesome.
So great. Yeah, I've enjoyed hearing her speak. I love what she posts. And makes perfect sense. But she's got she's just got a great heart. She's one of those people, if I run into that, I'm like, okay, how can I get out of this conversation? Because it's just...
She's got a lot.
Yeah, she's got a lot of wisdom.
Do you see, or have you seen FOPO in your life? Is this something that you...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That is definitely something that you realize when you have... Trying to be your most authentic self is a really scary thing, right? So
for you, because
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, they're going to find out.
I've always been obsessed. I look at with people who overcome obstacles, and whether it's an athlete or a veteran or I remember reading books as a kid, but I'm only now realizing this as like uncovered parts of myself of kids who were sick, kids who had cancer, like how, and thinking I wasn't strong. Like, well, I've never been through something like that. So now, of course, you get down through life and things get handed to you and you go, oh, wait, actually I'm tougher than I thought.
Yeah, I can do hard things.
I can do hard things. But I think that's such an important thing in knowing how to stand on your own 2 feet, because once you've learned that, then you find the right people to care, that you need to care about, that care about you.
And I would add one more dimension in there, which is once you've learned it, it's like going from the intellectual to the knowing. Once you really know that you can do hard things, there's a broadened base that takes over. But imposter syndrome is it's like a symptom of FOPO, fear of people's opinions.
Yeah.
It's like what are they going to think? They're going to find out one day that I'm just kind of making it up and I don't really know what I'm doing, and I hope they think I'm smart, and oh my God, I don't really know. I've never had my IQ tested, and I don't really know how their intelligence works, and like they think I'm smart. Okay, I guess I'm like, there's this whole, that's the second game that I'm talking about, and like it's exhausting. It's
exhausting. That goes to your human energy crisis, because I do feel like the other thing I watched with maybe I can't remember if I talked about this last time, but like when I look at champions, I'm constantly watching like physically how much energy they put out. Like watch Phil Dahlhauser. He doesn't run around between monster blocking. He is very calm, cool, and collected. And so I became interested in the physical part of it, but it's the same thing mentally. That, if you're wasting all that time thinking about what other people are thinking of you, you're not focused on your goals or your...
Yeah, so let's do like celebration between points. Yeah. If it's organic and it is natural, like if it's manufactured or performative, it's like, that's a whole different thing. Yeah. So when things are organic and spontaneous, they and there's a rise in an emotional expression. It's expensive.
Yeah.
But it's exponentially more expensive if you're trying to hold it all in to look a certain way, or if you're manufacturing joy or happiness or stoke or fire. It's the manufacturing and the holding in that is exponentially more expensive. And for most humans, we're pretty expensive. Like we're not efficient in the way that we use our emotions. And we're just talking about emotions here, right? Like letting them out or keeping them in. If you can be spontaneous and just be free, and you're not trying to control or constrain it in any way, we're just less expensive. So we're not tired at 2:00. We'll find ourselves tired at 8, 9:30 at night, as opposed to at 2:00, like, man, I need another cup of something. Like I'm exhausted. Yeah. Our relationship, the social aspect of recovery and well-being is really important. And if you are playing a second game to just look good, you're not really in a relationship with another person.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things you realize as you get older is that people say, oh, you really start to dial in your community. And not to say that you don't have these outer circles and you can, how to socialize or whatever, but like that community becomes really tight. And
how big is it for you?
3 really good girlfriends.
Yeah.
And that I could call at any point. And I would say less than 10.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be pretty fortunate. Like Dr. Robin Dunbar came up with the number 150. Mm-hmm. That 150 people at any given point in time, if you saw them in a random restaurant across the planet, that you'd be like, hey, Susie, oh my God, like, how dare you? And it would be like about 150 people but when you start to say like, who's your circle, it's usually less than 5. Yeah. Less than 1 hand. Yeah. If you have 2 hands of people or somewhere in there, that's cool.
I'm probably saying 10 because 4 of them are my kids. But
family does count.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does count. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, that's cool. But they're not really there for you in the way that you're there for them. Not yet, at least.
Correct.
Right? It's a little bit different.
That you're right.
Yeah. And maybe like I've been answering this question. People have been asking me lately, like, how do you think about success? Yeah. And I just love how I've been thinking about it lately. I'd like to run it by you. Is that success for me isn't having a loving wonderful relationship with my adult son. Like, I really want that. That's a variable of success.
Yeah.
He's 15 now, so I'm thinking like when I'm 35, you know, like 25, I guess.
Which, yeah, it happens fast, yeah.
To have like a great relationship with him, like that feels to me, that's a needle worth threading.
Yeah.
You know, and at the same time not abandon the two principles I'm trying to help him live in alignment with are kindness and strength. And then for him to know the values that he wants to build with those, and then to support and challenge him. So not over-indexing on support, not over-indexing on challenge, but finding that right blend between support and challenge. And, you know, so I can't wait.
That's
For
great.
the next, you know.
No, I think that's great parenting right
Yeah,
there.
I'm excited about it.
And
Yeah,
it takes up some headspace in my days for sure.
Does it?
So I'm
Support and then challenge.
support and challenge. I think like, you know, the flow state, challenge, skills, balance.
Yeah.
And part of, I think I've told you this, part of how I got into this is with trying to help my son who is on the spectrum and realizing that the same things that help him are the same things that really help all of us. But it's those tiny incremental gains that elite athletes get. And I'm just like, oh, look it's all related.
Yeah, right.
It's real, and you see the connection. I'm like, oh, this is like, just keep giving it to me. But one last question for the next generation. I have a lot of parents that listen. And is there some way that we can work with our kids? Because I think it's probably somewhat developmentally appropriate for them to notice what's going on around them, right?
Oh no, we want high awareness.
Right?
Yeah.
But so how do we work with our kids so that they're not worrying about what other people think at a younger age?
Yeah. Easiest answer I can give is to walk the talk, is to live that way. Yeah. They're watching. They are watching. And they might not even know how you are shaping, and you might not know how you're shaping their psychological framework. So I'll give you a very concrete example, is if when you were younger, Mom saw a rat in the kitchen and she jumps and she screams and she says, kill it, kill it, kill it, get that thing out of here, oh my God, and she's in a panic zone, you're gonna have a relationship with life and death of rodents. You know, oh, we kill rodents, and when they're around, we should be really scared. Okay, so that's just dramatic.
Yeah.
Using that as a moment, right? Versus the opposite would be if a rat's in the kitchen and, you know, your Zen Buddhist monk says, oh, look at this being. Oh, it's lost its way. Hey, let's build a little maze. Let's get, hey, go get that cardboard, get a couple cookbooks here. Let's get a little maze and let's help it find its way out into the you know, outside. Very different.
Yeah.
So the way we respond to what happens right after a conversation with somebody. And so say you're in the car with somebody. Let me use one more example before I get to the football piece. Is that why do kids leave sport? The car ride home. That's why they leave sport. And that, it's not because it's too intense on the court. It's not because they're not getting playtime. It's not because like they're getting yelled at, which coaches should not be yelled. Like we can do way better.
Yeah.
But that's not why they report leaving. They report leaving because it's like overwhelming on the 15 to 45 minute ride home, because we ask in our clever way, how was practice? But what we really want to know is, did you get better? Do you have a starting job? Did you score? What the coaches think of you? Do you know, like, are you a little bit better than them? Like, we are anxious.
Yeah.
And we start to cleverly ask questions. Now, the ones that are not so clever, and they're like, son, when are you going to figure your shit out? And, you know, like, you're not going to go anywhere if you got that attitude, or if you, like, that's not so clever. But that is so overwhelming, because what they want is love, support. They want to be challenged in a respectful way. And when it's manipulative or whatever, so they're learning. Okay, now I'll go to the third scenario. Your relationship with how much you worry about what somebody thinks about you and the way that you get dressed. So FOPO, an easy way to think about FOPO is there's the three phases. There's the phase of anticipating what somebody might say to me. There's the phase of when you're actually with another person and you're checking and to see, am I okay? And then the third phase is the way that you respond. Do you conform to the joke that's slightly offensive? You know, what do you do? Okay? Anticipation, checking, and then responding. So let's say that you're in your closet and you're getting ready for a holiday event, and your kid comes in and can tell, and you say, hey, how do I look in this? Oh, you just send a subtle little signal that I want to know how I look. Mm-hmm. Not that this is a problem in and of itself, but what if that is like the lenses of which now they want to get dressed? Because there's another way to do it, which is, hey, I feel really comfortable in this. I'm wondering if you think like this is kind of going to fit the vibe of the party. No, I think everyone's done wearing bell bottoms. Like, yeah, but I love them. Oh, are you gonna wear bell bottoms to the party? I'm like, no one wears bell bottoms. Yeah, I feel really good in these. That's a kind of a silly question that I even asked it, son or daughter. Like, yeah, I feel good in these. Yeah. Like, I'm gonna rock these things. It's a different way of doing it. And it's a weird example that I'm outlining.
No, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense actually, because I have different people in my life, and I think about my kids, and certain personalities are more.
What do I look?
Quick to say, oh no, I'm rocking the bell bottoms.
I feel good at here.
Yeah, I don't care if anyone else is wearing them.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm not saying mismanage social intelligence and like culturally appropriate. Right. Like I'm going to an event. It's a black tie optional, and so I asked my wife, like, what does optional mean? Mm-hmm. Does that mean I can wear whatever I want? And she said, it's usually like optional if you wear a black tie or a purple tie. Like,
yeah. Okay. Still wearing a suit.
Yeah. So I'm going in a suit. Yeah. I want to honor like the curator of the party's vision. Yeah. And I want to be part of that.
Exactly.
So, but this isn't me saying, if I wear this tie or this whatever, then they're gonna like me. Mm-hmm. That's the subtle difference.
Yeah.
And at one time I was like, I gotta look the part so that I'll be accepted, and I just don't want to blow it. And I would be walking up the stairs to a holiday party with friends, nervous.
Yeah.
Like, watch this in the holiday season. Uh-huh. Pre-party anxiety.
Yeah.
This is why kids drink. This is why adults drink before a party. Yeah. Because they're feeling a certain way about going and being vulnerable in conversations. Because you and I don't have this.
That is so true.
Yeah.
And that is so true. And I guess I wonder why I'm like, oh, I'm not a big party person. Like I would rather be at a table with 4 or 5 people max. Yeah. And stay there all night. Yeah. The best dinner party ever. Not you take me to those Manhattan Dish Christmas parties.
Yeah, right. Yeah, time to go. Yeah. And, well, some people are introverted. Some people are extroverted. Some people love those.
It's not because I don't love people, right? Yeah. I mean, you can still love people, but But
the point about this part is like the nervousness prior to something that's supposed to be fun. Yeah. It's the nervousness prior that might be a moment for you to check in. Like, is this faux pas? What is this? Is this I don't want to look stupid? Is this like I don't want to go and have to like play a second game? Yeah. I feel like I have to play a second game. I would encourage you and your community to just we'll go back to the parenting question, like bring it up. Just bring it up. Bring the concept up and walk the talk. Bring it up with your kids. And then when you feel your mind racing and you feel a little anxiousness in your body, like just take a moment, like how much of this has to do with my fear of rejection or my need to be accepted? How much of this is going on there? And it's just a moment. It might not be. Yeah. But the reason that the greatest fear for most Americans is public speaking. Yeah. It's not because in row 6 there's somebody with a shotgun, in row 12 there's someone with a machete, in row 14 there's somebody with a Luger. It's not that. It's their eyeballs. Yeah. They're looking at you. They've got ideas. You're afraid that you're going to look bad in their eyes. That's faux pas. You know what else is faux pas? Is when you're at a social event and you pick up your phone because you want to send a signal that you're in demand or you're busy or you've got other things going on as well. And faux pas is like when you're holding a cocktail at a party, you don't really want to drink, but you don't want to be the weird one out.
Yeah.
FOPO is like laughing at a joke that's slightly offensive, or you don't even know the joke. You didn't watch that movie, but you don't want to be the one that's like, oh, I missed that one too. I was studying a journal. Like,
Yeah.
so there's like a subtle art to this, and there's a demonstrative
Yeah.
feedback loop as well.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's reminded me of a conversation I had with my daughter just recently about like being the one who's okay with the gossip versus not. Like if
You want her to be okay with
no, to not be
You want-
okay. Like when you feel uncomfortable because you feel like it's gossip and not just like a good story, but someone saying gossip,
Yeah,
talking
right.
about someone who's not in the room. And do you speak up or do you add to it or do you sit back?
So that actually, I think, is one of the response mechanisms of FOPO. So contorting who you are to fit in, that's pretty radical. Conforming, it's a little more acceptable. Critiquing other people, because if I'm afraid of what you might be thinking of me, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to take that fear and I'm going to put your potential critique by guiding your thoughts on how shitty she is or he is. Now, if you and I are talking about Jane or Xander or whoever, and we're closer. We feel connected because we're critiquing. So that's like gossip, right? So critique is another way. Confrontation is a fourth way. So if I'm feeling a certain way and I'm not sure if you're judging or critiquing, and then I get offensive, I get on the offense. I'm like, hey, what's your problem? Like,
Yeah.
why do you always do that? So now I'm getting offensive. So now you better worry about my critique of you. You better worry about my judgment, because it's overwhelming for me to say, hey, I'm having a moment. I'm like kind of freaking out that like we're not good. Like, are we okay? You know, we don't want to do, so we just get, and then the last is we just like, it's too much, so we just disconnect.
Yeah.
Right, so we just cut it off. We just don't engage.
Man.
Everybody's different, and I've seen all forms of those, right? And through your lifetime, you will.
Right, yeah. Like,
No, you asked them out beautifully.
yeah, no, I've lived them all too. That's
Yeah,
how I know that.
yeah.
And that is not evidence-based. There's not research. That's me thinking about me and my loved ones, like how we do FOPO.
Yeah.
So that is an unstudied
Yeah.
bit of research.
Well, like I said, it's a beautiful book, and I
Thank
think
you
it
so
really
much.
is going to teach people to ask the questions of themselves, which I'm all about. I think taking this in makes people braver to ask these questions and to realize what's going on. And
That is a cool statement.
I'm really happy this is out in the world.
Thank
Yeah.
you for the way that you show up in the world and how you create space for me, and I'm sure for countless others, and you're doing so much good in the world. I just thank you for including in what you're doing.
For seeing that.
You're standing for optimism. You're standing for a better future, and that is not lost on me. To stand, you're a beacon of hope for standing for a better next, and it's awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was an absolute pleasure and a joy, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on What I Meant to Say, another production of Inspired Edutainment brought to you by Be Better Media.